Good afternoon, everyone. So thanks for coming in. I appreciate taking the time to attend this particular session. So today's session, we want to look at, we've been conducting this session for the last 4 years, and we've been on and off looking at how the digital manufacturing journey is going along from the various enterprises. And we have been polling some of those informations and identifying what are the opportunities, how industry is focusing on Serena in their journey as such. So today's edition is to look at from a digital enterprise maturity index. So the session that we plan to cover is in terms of two. One, we would have the panel respond to certain questions that we have and also lead the audience at the end to ask certain questions. And also in between that, we would send you that certain questions. We'll post some questions for you to respond to that questions in terms of the polling gadgets that you have to ABC. You can select one of the options and we'll see how that resonates and we lead some of those questions into the panel itself using that information. Okay. So just to start with, I'm Neelakandan Sharma. I'll be the moderator. I'm part of the digital advisory group of L&T Technology Services. So part of the overall L&T Technology Services, to give a quick about our company. We are around 16,000 employees, which purely focused on engineering services and manufacturing. So we are more focused on the engineering side rather than on the IT. So we come up from the ground up, from the engineering aspect of it, how the machine connectivity and everything. And we are close to around $800 million in terms of revenue. And from one of the key aspects of L&T Technology Services being that we have created patents, 460 patents, working with various customers. So one is the investment going into patents, creating some of the white spaces that we see in the industry that has been done. So that's the hallmark of one of the engagements that we have with customers. We are around 51 plus leading R&D engagement, R&D service spenders where we are engaged with them in terms of revenues they're looking at. So that way that we see where the spend is there in terms of research and development, we are involved in that. That's a quick, in terms of looking from a panel, what we have esteemed panel with us. So starting with Kevin Carpenter on the far right. Kevin is the Vice President for Advanced Manufacturing at Carrier, based out of Carrier headquarters in Palm Beach, so he's pretty close to this place. And in this juncture, as you may know, that Carrier, UTC is separating it out into various business units, and part of it is going into, a part of Raytheon, and some portion of it has been separated out into Carrier and Notice. So he's, at this point of the separation, it's a critical piece. He's playing a critical role as an advanced manufacturing division. So in the critical role, he's shaping up the future in terms of as a standalone company and leading this particular Carrier advanced manufacturing function. Prior to joining Carrier, he had various leadership roles in Rockwell Automation and in manufacturing services area. Thanks, Kevin, for joining in. Ralph Rio, he doesn't need any new introductions as such. He's part of this ARC advisory board. So focuses on engineering design tools for plants, blockchain, global service providers. He's written 200 plus in terms of reports while in ARC. And the areas that he had been focused on, engineering design tools, blockchain, global services, which includes that areas like asset management, IoT, computerized maintenance management, CMM, asset performance management. The list goes endless. In fact, it's a huge list. And he's been very familiar with the ERP, HMI, batch, historian, CNC, PLCs, and areas around it. The last that we have, Prabhakar Shetty is the global head for L&T Technology Services. He's been critical in terms of being part of the digital journey of major corporations that they're looking at, from engineering to manufacturing. And from his experience, he's been seeing a lot of these trends over the period of time, how it has shaped some of the organizations to gain the competitive edge. So thanks, Prabhakar, for joining in. So let's start with, in terms of from a polling question. So we start with the polling questions. So everyone has gone into the digital journey, right? You are in various phases of the digital journey. Some cases that you are there, you are into the POCs and various phases. So we wanted to identify where you are, how far are you in the digital journey. So one is that where you are in the identified use cases, are in the implemented proof of concept, you have gone into the proof of concept, and now you are in the plan of converting the proof of concepts into a solution, or then scaling up into a plant level, or scaling up into an enterprise level. So these are the ones. So tell me once you are done, then we'll just take that in. It's a real time, so we're just getting the clicks as you go along that. So has everyone got that, the polling? Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. This is like the voice and others that you just keep polling and seeing that who's winning in that. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So looking at in terms of it, the scaling up to digital at an enterprise level, I think this is pretty good in terms of looking at 33% of the audience is saying that that's the stage where they are. And 15% in the last few years, we have seen that the trend has been more and more of identifying use cases where they are in the journey and doing it. We've seen that the trend has moved a little past that in terms of looking at how can they scale up to the enterprise level. That's pretty heartening to see that. And also some of them are moving into from a POCs to a collaborative solutions, because most of them had started with POCs and they have moved up to the next phase, looks like. Pretty good. Going to the next question. So the other thing is also from what we have done from our own, from a polling that we did with the 170 plus major corporations, and getting to know from what the stakeholders think about where they are in the journey. So we see that they are at this, because this has been over the period that we have collected last year, December. So it depends upon the various stakeholders whom we are talking to get this information. So it may vary, but what we felt was that at the time it was more identifying the use cases, what they were looking at. Proof of concepts became the 16%. We see that they converted the proof of concept into solutions, and they're further down in terms of where they are in the digital, into the enterprise level and the plant level. So they're further down in that stream. Okay, next question. So what are your priorities in your digital manufacturing process? So looking at what are the priorities. So digital manufacturing, everyone is going into that. So manufacturing operations management, looking at, is it more on the asset and product information, OE information, or a PLM system? Because where you are in looking at the priorities from your organization standpoint. I think it's from an audience standpoint, maybe that we will get to know from where the audience are, from where they come from, a background looking at. So around 40%, is it good? Yeah. So if it's 44%, it looks like most of the audience may have come in from manufacturing side, so that may be a little bit skewed looking at, but we also see the same trend in terms of looking at from other polling that majority of them looking at manufacturing operations management. The next is OE report, where we are looking at the OE report. This is in line with what we found from the other polling we did with large corporations. 52% were looking at, in terms of manufacturing operation manager, productivity improvement, line improvement, what they're looking at, all of those areas. And then OE becomes an integral part of it, because everyone wants to see that how their OE report looks at, benchmarking against their own plants, their own other peers, looking at where they stand in terms of from OE stand. So this looks in line with what we are seeing from our assessment. The next one. So what we see that is that the manufacturing industries to adopt the Industry 4.0 is that why is it not scaling up? Why is that it is not going it? Because everyone feels they are in the bandwagon. What's the reason that it is not scaling up and going faster than what we think we should? Difficult to deliver ROI, non-availability of pragmatic roadmap, is that the roadmap is more theoretical associated with it, is practical to implement it. Lack of people-centric, industry benchmarks and others. People-centric, it also comes in along with the organizational, how the organization structure is aligned. This morning we were talking about how the structure of the organization, also sometimes impediments, is that a roadblock to move in terms of the digital strategy itself. Adoptions. So we see from the, just if you go back to the previous one, just to see where the trend was looking at. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's 36% were saying that difficult to deliver ROI. I think that's always been the case, that where we feel that is there an ROI, certain things are there. That's the whole idea today, is to demystify some of those aspects and see that how can we overcome some of the ROI challenges to enter into that and bring that particular into fruition. Right? There are thoughts behind it. How do you build the ROI? And then the non-availability of pragmatics. This is another thing, that the roadmap sometimes defines such a way that it's too far down, that can that be realized now? What can be realized now? We'll come down into that, some of the panel questions to ask those, what can be done now to improve it? So in terms of our assessment, looking at where we are, so we felt the same thing from what we polled from the larger audience, from the business units. 52% were saying difficult to deliver that, and non-availability. So this is in line with what we see, what we hear from you from here. Now let's get back into some of the questions that we wanted to ask the panel from based on what we see in here. So let's start with Ralph in terms of what you see. There's a major corporations are going around the world. You have interacted with major corporations. And there have been some of what we are saying, they have got challenges in terms of planned or enterprise poses difficult solutions that can be addressed. Based on your interactions, what are the common priorities customers in the digital manufacturing journey? What is that you feel is that in the industry you're seeing that?
Yeah, so there is a tendency to focus on the technology rather than the particular application. We find a much higher success rate when they focus on the problem that they're trying to solve. Now, initially, a lot of that was around predictive maintenance and using a small set of data from a particular piece of equipment to monitor the health of that equipment and take corrective action before it fails. We found that as a start, as an early success, that won a lot of praise, because unplanned downtime is just really horrific, particularly in the continuous process industries, but just about every place else, because when the equipment isn't running, you can't make product. We've seen that success broaden into other initiatives. So people who started with a small data approach and grew from there seem to have sticking power and success. Those folks who started with a big data approach, put everything into a data lake and apply some analytics and hope it does something for them. It was just too complicated for the machine learning to start creating valid alerts. And those initiatives seem to never get out of proof of concept hell. So the successes we've seen is start small, maybe predictive maintenance, maybe some operational performance thing on a particular machine or a particular class machine, and then grow from there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Ross. So one that's leading again to the same in terms of going forward with Kevin. The industry has seen that from a 4.0 waves that we've seen in terms of maturity, and there is an emergence of latest technologies coming in. AI, if you look at it, say blockchain, 5G, it looks like there is a second wave of Industry 4.0 moving into that. But manufacturing is still struggling to get to that and saying these new technologies coming in and saying, is it allowing it to move forward? And what's your opinion is that sometimes you find that technology is becoming more and more, should we wait for it or change it, or what is that next step?
That's a totally different question than I prepared for. Cheat sheet. He didn't give me the right cheat sheet. We get caught up in a lot of technology and technology for the sake of technology. Based off of the questions that you guys answer, we're manufacturing folks in the room. And we usually have to sell what we want to do to the controller or the CFO, of which they don't understand what we're talking about. So we have to sell the value benefit of it. The reason why we're not scaling as quickly with technology is because a lot of our plants are still in Industry 3.0. We have to get back to the basics of manufacturing 101. Do we have a value stream map? Do we have standard work? How do we attain our schedule? Are we running efficiently? Do we have a standard that we're going towards? Then after you have that, you connect the machines. Then you have the software overlay. And then you enable the automation with your mom. And that's when you can start getting visibility from end to end in order to drive out different waste within the system. We get a nice new toy and we apply it to a non-optimized system. And all it does is makes the controller or the CFO know that the technology is not going to work. And that's what makes me nervous all the time when we say we're going in Industry 4.0, let's get some more tools, nice shiny objects, and we haven't even adopted standard work in our plants.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I build on?
Yep, absolutely.
Can I build on what he said? So just in case everybody's not aware of, he used some terms that are associated with lean manufacturing. And the basics, core basics of lean manufacturing have to do with understanding the value that your customer is interested in, then create standard work and standard business processes, and then value stream map. What value stream map is a way of graphically depicting the process. And the thing that I found very valuable about value stream mapping in the context of Industry 4.0, is that when the value stream map is up there, you often can identify processes that could be improved with current technology. You know, you had a way of doing things that you may be doing for 10, 20 years, and a lot of the improvements can be associated with just looking at current technology and applying it in the value stream map. And I want to emphasize that the value stream map is done by a Kazon team of the people who actually do the work. I'm not talking about some senior executive who runs in for an hour meeting and doesn't really know what's going on.
So it's not us.
Yeah. So it's the people who actually do the work, and then you get a very accurate value stream map. And you know, maybe you need some engineers in to help them understand what technologies could map into that map or be placed in the map to improve the business processes. And,
go ahead, please. Sorry.
And we're not just talking about like you said, technology for tech. In the value stream map, you've got a broader business process that the team has put together. Sure. And it's in the context of that particular business process and making it more efficient one way or another.
Yeah, a lot of times, if you look at your process from an end-to-end standpoint, raw materials in to conversion to finished good to customer, you may not even need technology. You may just need to apply what you have now to say, how can I balance this line? Understanding the plant's pain points is where you start before you do any type of software overlay or try to convert to even applying automation technology. You can apply certain manufacturing engineering technology to different waste points that's a part of the system that may not even cost that much, but you still can get what the company is depending on this room to do. That's drive productivity, efficiency, and attainment of a schedule.
And I'll just put in plug for L&T. You know, these guys focus on engineering services. They know manufacturing inside and out. So if you got this value stream map, you're talking about putting a technology in there. You may need some engineering support to make it work. Sure. The L&T Technology Services are a good source of engineers to help that happen. I hope you don't mind the plug.
Yep. No, thank you. Appreciate that. It's always welcome. So in fact, just on that's the same thing. In terms of looking at, is that the ground level that we need to get to that basics, sometimes to get the foundation in and laying out on the technology and on top of it would be sometimes that we have. In some cases, maybe that we may come down the line, whether technology can help to lay that ground and push that some of the boundaries which is being set to push it ahead. Sometimes technology may influence certain things to say, you need to move this. You cannot have it because you can't get inside. Okay, just going on to the next question, Prabhakar, that you have been in terms of from an enterprise, you have been dealing with a lot of organization in terms from a services standpoint. So enforcing to adopt digital deployment, because one of the key things this morning we also heard that what is that we have something that we can be deployed quickly enough, roll it out faster in terms of it from an enterprise wide, is that we start somewhere and can it be rolled out, not to create in one particular plant. And is that due to not getting rolled out due to lack of benchmarks, impact, process, not knowing what's the impact of businesses, processes? And is it much of the first mover syndrome that is coming in? So what is your recommendation looking at how do you go about in terms of a smart deployment? Because the business case associated that comes with a smarter deployment across enterprise sometimes.
I would agree with Kevin. If you look at most of the digital initiatives, we tend to sort of overcomplicate them by either starting with technology or ideas. My take is, like Kevin said, look at your internal processes. They might not even need technology. It's about aligning those processes to the new world, right? So this is an opportunity for business transformation rather than looking at a technology infusion into the company. So Q, in terms of how can we do it, this is based on whatever we have seen across the industry. We work with multiple verticals, industry segments across the globe. I think it's very important to be clear in terms of what are the business cases you are evolving. Now, most of the business cases need to have what is the outcome, what is the ROI, but don't get too carried away, bogged down by the dollar part of the ROI. Because if you are looking at process improvement and data enablement of not only, it's not about machines, right? Ultimately, the processes need to consume the data and get you something. Some of the data initiatives might not have a dollar ROI right at the outset. So you need to be patient about that. Second, once you sort of identify the business cases, again, going back to what Kevin said, get your plant folks, the key stakeholders are plant folks, because they are the ones who know what is good for your organization. They are the ones who know how things work. And you need to sort of look at involving them early on into building this business case. Most of the time, there would be benchmarks, but my recommendation is ultimately this is your journey. And looking at the kind of technologies which are available, you need not be boxed into something which somebody else next to you is doing. Take this opportunity to build what I call as your customized digital journey. Benchmarks can be references, but it's about the history of your own data, which will define what are the kind of projects or initiatives you're going to do. You might at least have 3 to 6 new ideas coming in if you don't lean too much on the benchmark, but into your own internal organization data points. Once you do that, probably you need to follow some of the software ideas, like ensuring that we start early in terms of getting the work going, at least start designing wireframes, because you are dealing with stakeholders who are not used to, I would say, the classic enterprise app technology kind of initiatives. These are hands-on people. They want to see success early on. That's the reason any of these initiatives implement it in an agile form, where you do the basic design, show it back to the stakeholders right in the shop floor as well as the management. You might face early successes. You might not have some of those challenges which are coming up in terms of convergence, acceptance, and thus leading to better adoption. And then you can probably scale it up in a far more sensible manner. Like Ralph said, initial pilots need to be boundaried into small segment. It could be a paint shop, it could be a line, it could be one geo, it could be a smaller plant, it could be a procurement process, so on and so forth. That's my take on that.
Perfect. So, in fact, looking at from the one, it's not the digital journeys should always be in part of it, but then you'll also lay the foundation and see that what needs to be done in terms of it. That right. And the ROI and you are looking at is more towards your own. If there is no benchmark, it need not be the one. No one has tried it. It's something that within your organization, what you say is that you create your own benchmark. You create your own. What is the ROI that will benefit, rather than looking at what others have done. And that there is some experience that you can learn from it. But I understand that pretty good. So let's get into some of the polling questions, just get a little more insight into that. Oh, there you go. So one that this morning also we heard that the cyber security is one of those critical ones where how much of that has been looked at it? Is it independently looked at it? Initiatives running separately, partially integrated, integral part of the strategy? Because Industry 4.0, when you look at it, cybersecurity becomes a critical ingredient. It used to be earlier, it used to be a security, yes, we had afterthought, but now is it part of the scheme that you're defining the roadmap as you define the roadmap? So what we see is that this has become an integral part of the strategy. That's good. That's good to see that that's part of the strategy, because in others we have seen that in the earlier days that it used to be separately done by IT. They are running on their own. There is a security which is running it, but not connected at the factory level. So from our assessment, what we are looking at it, that's running separately. 49% said that from the polling that we had, 49% were a separate one. 25% were the integral part, and 26% is equally between them, partially integrated with the Industry 4.0, because there is a separate one that they've been running from an IT standpoint on the security side. Going to the next questions, running out of time. So what describe in terms of real-time data utilization for decision-making process for your enterprise? Connectivity, leveraging connectivity on new machines, but not legacy machines. Interconnected machines, but data integration is a challenge. Challenge with real-time data utilization, connectivity is not. So some of these things, what do you feel is that your connectivity, machine connectivity, and real-time data collection? So from looking at what you see that more and more interconnected machines. Okay, yeah. So looking at that, just going back to the earlier slide, so what we see that 46% of you said that it's interconnected machines, but data integration is a challenge. So the machines are interconnected, but that you're not able to get the data. And the other decision making through real-time data is a challenge that where you are in making your enterprise decisions. Okay. So from what the polling that we had from the larger audience, that connectivity on new machines was a one, but not with legacy machines. That's the challenge. Interconnected machines are the one which is on 21% and 90%. So mostly looked at, they were leveraging the connectivity on new machines, but not the legacy applications, machines. The next one, in terms of potential challenges in becoming data-centric from document-centric, because a lot of these files are there in the in paper form, in different formats and everything, is that conversion from data, conversion from legacy to digital. Is that one of those absence of integrated ecosystem, non-meaningful data? So some of these questions, unavailability of unified platform to fetch data, that's another one that we've seen. And all of the above. Okay. It looks like most of it is all of the above. So wow. Somewhere everyone looks like you have all the challenges that you're looking at in terms of paper and non-meaningful data. There's a ton of data collected and no platform to collect the data across. So the one that we also looked at, 41%, which also looks at maybe that it's a combination we've seen, but 75% of them is from the legacy data, because some of those old data which is still there, they want to get connected, but need to digitize it. There is an ROI issue, are looking at whether you should do it. And then absence of integrated systems. So these look like most of it, but all of them obviously brings in every element into that whole folder itself. Now coming to the next set of questions that we had in terms of going for. One that from Ralph, with the rapidly changing the industry 4.0, how do you foresee the shape of manufacturing in the next 5 years? What do you see as the industry looks like in 2024?
Yeah, that I know we're supposed to forecast and be able to foresee the future, but this day and age with technology changing so rapidly, that's problematic to say the least. But in general, I see less emphasis on, well, I shouldn't say that. We'll always be enamored by shiny objects. But I see more and more emphasis coming about the more general business process and how the technology maps in to provide some return on investment. You know, for example, we used to talk about IoT a lot. And that gradually grew into predictive maintenance and process optimization type applications. And we talk less and less about IoT, and we're talking more and more about Industry 4.0. And that makes sense because the roots of Industry 4.0, as it was defined in Germany by the German government, et cetera, was much more around the business processes rather than specific technologies. And I see that movement from being enamored with an IoT as a technology and more moving into Industry 4.0 as being entirely appropriate and where it's going in the future.
So is to say that IoT and the Industry 4.0 convergence, is it encompassing as part of it IoT? Or is,
I think it's going to become less and less what's the latest shiny object, though there will always be some technicians who like to talk about that, and more about the business process optimization. How do I eliminate waste in the lean case, for example? And lean is, we all know this, but I want to be specific around it. Lean is not just for the discrete industries. It's moved well beyond that into the process industries, hospitals, and believe it or not, even in some government institutions. So it's become much more pervasive than it was in the not too distant past.
Okay, thank you. So just Kevin, that various factors impacting the digital adoption of Industry 4.0, digital technologies, platform. You also mentioned earlier that it's more to get the foundation in terms of looking at it. At Carrier, where you see the priorities when it comes to the digital adoption of new technologies, what are the challenges that you're facing while adopting some of these, and how do you turn around and make that challenges, mitigate those challenges and take it forward?
This stuff is expensive, right? So that's the biggest challenge, the expense. When you go and try to ask for millions of dollars to digitize your plant, and the CFO is going to say, well, what's the payback? The controller is going to say, what's the payback? And if you don't have the proper use cases to articulate that, you're not going to get the money, because it's a battle for capital in every company, right? You have to show what value that capital is going to get, the return on the net asset that you're going to put on the plant floor. That's why I always urge anybody that I talk to, in order for this to truly be adopted, we have to assess our total environment. And as you assess your total environment from a digital standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint, from a lean standpoint, and understanding how things flow, then the process will speak to you. And when the process speaks to you, you understand the pain points. And when you understand the pain points of the plant, you're going back to the basic fundamentals of what we do as operations leaders. That's drive productivity so the business can grow. Believe it or not, that's all they look at us for. That's all the business looks at. It's sexy, but it's needed. Because if we don't give that 3 to 5% productivity year over year in our operations, our company can't invest in new product introductions. They can't invest in other parts of the market. They can't hire sales folks to go out there and actually turn revenue. So we have to think of more creative ways to do that. Therein lies Industry 4.0. If you look at it from an end-to-end standpoint, it's kind of the digitalization of lean. How many of you are familiar with APQP, Advanced Product Quality Planning? If you really go back and study that, all we're doing is looking at the flow, putting digital on it, extracting data at certain points that go into some type of metric. And then when that metric goes a different way and out of control, we drive that metric to a positive result. That's what we're dependent on to do, because we can't get the low-hanging fruit anymore. And we have to be more creative in the way we get to that 3 to 5% productivity. That's what we're dependent on as operations leaders, to get to that.
Well, thank you.
If I could build on that just a bit. Sorry, I can't help myself. Focus on the problem. Another way of saying it, what is the problem? And then map the technology in to solve that problem. And I'll go back to predictive maintenance and IoT for a moment. 3 or 4 years ago, when IoT first started to become commercially viable, there was a huge white space in predictive maintenance. There were not good solutions for predictive maintenance. And IoT just went in every application 2 or 3 years ago, just about every application I looked at least 90% of them were around IoT was predictive maintenance because there was such a huge white space. And there's a natural tendency to focus on IoT as a result and pitch that technology for technology's sake and forget about it was solving. It was particularly well at that time, well adept at solving a particular problem around predictive maintenance and assessing the condition of an asset. What was the problem? The problem was unplanned downtime. What solved the problem was IoT and analytics. And that's the approach. Focus on the problem first.
Sure. A lot of times we're not even operating to the standard we have for the line. Our standard was designed for maybe 75% efficiency. We go back and look at it as per our standard, we're probably operating at 65%. That 10% is hard productivity savings. Imagine if we had a software overlay that can alert us when we're not operating toward the standard. We have too many people in the cell. We have quality defects. We're not building at rate. Those are fundamentals of efficiency. That's OEE. And when we look at what we have in our ERP, our routing, of what we have in our standard, we need to always look at how we're operating towards our standard. And that's what the software will give you. That's one of the most important things. I would always call it win the hour. Are you winning the hour on your plant floor? If you're designed to operate 85%, 75% of a standard and you're operating at 50, 60, you're leaving money on the table. That's operational bleed. So those types of alerts, those type of dashboards, what the software can give you. And those are things that we hardly ever see that in these shows. And that's easy money for us. Are you winning the hour? Are you doing what you're costed to do? Because anything in manufacturing, if you touch it longer than you're supposed to and you don't get it out on time, it's a cost in manufacturing.
Thank you, Kevin. I think I agree with you. In fact, one of the other discussions I had, one of the customers, they said they had what they OEE in terms of the utilization. They came down to around, I think, 60%. And they level that as the basic norm. Now, anything beyond it is supposed to be good. But actually, the plant is supposed to be at 75, 80%. But their baseline, because of all the inefficiencies and everything, they said, we can't go anything production more than this because we know the problems are there and we can do it. I agree with that. So somewhere you had to go back and see where this is and the process side, can we get, this is money on the table that we can get that in. And sometimes digital will help and sometimes it's a process that you need to make those changes to happen. Sure. So that leads to the next question in terms of looking at, so Prabhakar, that we have seen that a discussion that we had, how the digital journey, some of them are not there. How does you see the industry looking at from a conventional and digital? How do they go along, coexist? Because there could be some areas of where the digital has moved past, somewhere it's digitally not there yet. So how do you see from your experience in the services industry?
When you say conventional IT.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, quickly, what Kevin and Neil just mentioned goes back to what we discussed earlier. You need to set your own benchmarks, okay? Because where capability is 60%, there's no point setting a benchmark of OE which is 25%. You're going to fail anyway. Nobody is going to accept it. Now, coming back to this question of traditional IT versus the new age, whatever shining pieces, as Ralph put it, I think it's again going back to basics. You need to look at not only IT application or technology rationalization. Before that, you need to relook at process rationalization itself. Again, this is an opportunity where if you use any of these new technologies with a lot of insights into processes from a contextual standpoint of your organization, there will be a lot of opportunity to make your processes crisp, clear, far more empowered. If all this is in place, then something like AI coming in makes sense. That means your foundations needs to be far better, far more connected. Coming to technology itself, if you look at today, despite so many things being spoken about technology, there are inherent challenges in terms of machine connectivity, getting the data. If data is available, how do you sort of ensure that the data is transferred, so on and so forth. And there's a second aspect of enterprise applications. So I would rather say that if you're going to define your future around the use cases which are relevant to you, the technology also need to follow the same path. So I would say that it's not about new or the old technology. You need to form an architecture which is IT/OT integrated. You could probably use the old technology if it makes sense. Okay. But what is more important, what we propose these days is I could have a MES, PLM, and the combination of ERP, everything as a black box underneath, which become the foundation for me to build what I call as microservices, which are related to the use cases which you have defined for successes. This will probably make it easier for not only adoption, future scalability, and growth of the organization. That's where it is. So the old and new can coexist until and unless you have a serious issue in terms of supporting the old technology. Like Kevin mentioned earlier, many a times we found that some of the business problems need not have fancy pieces of computing around it. Even a process tree could solve the problem. So the future is all about trying to sort of encapsulate your organization in terms of use case alignment with the microservices on your architecture, which can be IT/OT integrated architecture.
Thank you, Prabhakar. I think we'll just, I know we're running short on time, so we'll just go to the polling questions. And so key challenges in running PLM systems. So as part of the digital strategy that you have, is that PLM systems, is that gap between IT and engineering, is a lack of synergy between managed service providers, multiple non-aligned SLAs, because the engineering and IT has a different SLAs that they follow certain things. Is that a lack of domain knowledge in terms of the IT itself and the engineering? So I just wanted to understand when we view the threat from Industry 4.0, looking at from a PLM standpoint, going down in terms of the manufacturing side and into the services. So just wanted to understand from your perspective where you are in this. Looks like that it's more of the between IT and engineering. There's a gap between IT and engineering, which is typical. We are seeing that from most of it. They have a gap because it's sometimes it's engineering runs IT, IT runs engineering. Which who's running who? Sometimes is a challenge to know. So what we have in terms of we see the same thing from our polling, looking at gap between IT and engineering department, 64%, that you see the same thing we're seeing. So it resonates well with what we see from the audience that you are looking at also. The next one, in terms of, so how aligned is your technology selection to people in your factory? Is it most on the cost imperatives, production requirements, you just had it, or it is that's from a visibility and pieces around persona, people mapping, and integration of personas with technology selections, looking at various users, what kind of users, what kind of profiles are you looking at? That looks like it's more from a manufacturing audience. So obviously, I would expect that based on production requirements. Okay. So 60% is on 50 to 60% on that, the production being one of those. Sometimes it's more on the production side. And the cost is obviously the second factor that looks like. So obviously it dovetails into both of these into next. So from what we have seen from our polling, also looking at the large audience, as said earlier, technology selection is on the cost, because cost has become one of those where digital can help in reducing the cost and looking at. And production and operation side, looking at even improving the production cost will lead into a cost aspect of it. So, good. So what are the 5 top investment areas? Is that from your manufacturing strategy? IoT, we spoke about earlier, smart automation, advanced analytics, getting the data and using it, cybersecurity, autonomous systems, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, and augmented reality. AR, VR is also coming up. So we thought we'll pull in AR, VR also.
Multiple options.
Yeah. So here, there are 5 options here. So you can pick 1, 2, 3. There are 5 times you can click that one, various options. You don't pick the same 5. It may not, but you can select 5 of the options to see. Because I know the selection is like 7 or 8 selections. So obviously we want to give you a little more chance to see. It's not only one, maybe multiple. Looking at smart automation and advanced analytics being the top, and followed by we had cybersecurity. Pretty good. I think sometimes the smart automation in terms of reducing the cost, productivity improvement, what can be done in terms of cost reductions look like more on that front, and using the data to see what can be done further in looking at. So coming back into the last few questions, I just wanted to have one, from what we have seen that moving forward, how do we navigate through the challenges in devising the roadmap? Because sometimes you find that roadmap, to define the roadmap, how do you navigate that? You would have had some of those experience from various customers, how you have helped them in terms of navigating it. If you can share what they can do it now in terms of leapfrogging into that particular, I would say, in terms of digital strategy, how they can move in for now? Because I know most of them have a future roadmap, which is 2 years, 5 years, but is it what can we start now? Sorry, it's for Ralph.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay,
sorry.
all right. I'm not a big fan of roadmaps, quite frankly, because or generic roadmaps, because every company is so very different. You know, in the case of a company that's deep in discrete manufacturing, lean, you know, maybe the roadmap is basically train the black belts on current technology and, you know, like IoT and analytics and stuff like that, and help the Kazon teams understand where that technology may fit in their value stream maps, right? And then in other industries that are let's say in the continuous process industries, the complexity of the operations is a lot higher, and it would be a completely different roadmap. So I'm you know, I'm kind of hesitating around the roadmap idea.
All right.
Kevin is
Kevin,
a little
is that
closer to
maybe?
reality than I am.
Road mapping, I look at as your strategy, right? So you got to have something out there as to where you're going. When you look at road mapping for your plant floor, for your operations, you want to have a group of projects that's based off of good use cases to drive value. And one size does not fit all, but it has to be customized for your business. If you, and you know, you don't want to go and with anything with technology, as you guys know, when we're trying to push it, the big bang is not going to work. It's not a bucket of money. Everything that we do in a plant, we have to absorb for it. We have to make sure that we have some type of return. So as you do your roadmaps, we need to be realistic. It needs to be socialized, and you need to align with the business and make sure you have the buy-in from all the different stakeholders, because it's not just in your circle of your team that's out there doing it. It's the stakeholders from truly the shop floor to the top floor, operators on the floor, the supervisors on the floor, the business leaders, the CFO, the CEO. They have to be aligned as to what you're trying to do for the digital transformation for Industry 4.0, because if they're not, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So you have to try to articulate that message to show how you improve those metrics by doing that roadmap.
And Kevin gave me a chance to think. So each area may have its own roadmap. For example, take the predictive maintenance case with IoT a few years ago, where that was very popular. That has morphed in many cases into not just predictive maintenance, but also operational performance of the equipment. And it starts to turn into a bit of an OEE metric. So you have a path there where what was predictive maintenance grew into a broader, more meaningful application. And that also can now grow. Let's say you start doing predictive maintenance for all your pumps. And you have a few hundred pumps in your plant, in a refinery, for example. Now you can start moving that from small data approach, meaning data from each individual pump, and start looking at all of your pumps as a class of asset. And you start making decisions like what's the best practices, who's the best supplier, who makes the most reliable pump, and those kinds of things. So the roadmap, in a nutshell, then, the roadmap is not for your entire plant, though there may be exceptions. It's more around certain application areas. You start small and build on that success.
In fact, thanks. In fact, we are running short on time, so I just wanted to thank you all for coming in. joining us today in this workshop. And so we are close to 2. We wanted to ask you, wanted to let you ask a few questions, but unfortunately we are running short on time. So definitely join us on the booth or somewhere we can catch us there, and we will be able to respond to any of the questions. And send it on email, and we'll share that across. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks.